Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, ship in a bottle. Ship in a bottle on It's All Been Checked Before. You know what's not a ship in a bottle is patreon.com/IBD. It's not like putting a ship in a bottle. That seems complicated. This is very easy. Doesn't take much dinero. Yeah, I'm speaking Spanish. Does not take much of that moolah. No inflation. In fact, we're moving the other way on Patreon thing. And you get all the bonus stuff. You get the video, not just from us, but the mothership, IBD, the IBD Radio Hour. All kinds of great stuff there. And a little bit of swag too. So check it out, patreon.com/IBD. And check this out. Ship in a bottle on It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Shrek'd Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Stephen.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. We are here to talk the Next Generation episode, Ship in a Bottle, one of the rare sequel Next Generation episodes. We had like a couple of reoccurring characters, like Q came back, Sela came back, you know, Kalar, the Duras sisters, but this is the first like truly sequel story to a previous story that wasn't a two-parter, I think, especially with 4 years between the two?
Mm-hmm.
What were your first impressions of the episode?
Well, I mean, I love that sort of thing, continuity in general for its own sake. I mean, they certainly continued in the same vein of addressing the moral quandaries of how this, how the being worked, and I really appreciated that. So,
yeah, my first impressions, and this won't surprise you guys. This is from and my friends at my favorite Star Trek Tumblr, Fashion It So. Yet another holodeck episode that proves the holodeck is, in all capital letters, ridiculously dangerous and probably not a thing to have on a spaceship. That said, I started from a place, and just like the original episode, so it was a sequel for me in that sense. I know the first Moriarty episode, the first half, I'm like, okay, it's a friggin' holodeck, and then at the end, I'm like, okay, you got me. This one did the same thing, because I had a couple comments where I'm like, oh geez, well, they should do this. And then I'm like, oh no, they just did that. Yeah, that's great. This is awesome. So I definitely came around on it. And just to touch real quick while we're using the term sequel, I thought there was a con parallel here too. Actually, while we're talking the greatest Star Trek sequel, because Moriarty's like, yeah, it's been 4 years. You said you were going to figure it out, and you left me out here for 4 years. It wasn't nearly as long as Khan. It wasn't 15 years, but I immediately picked up on that parallel, and I thought it was. I appreciated that. So. Yeah, I ended up liking it a lot. Jimmy and I were talking in the green room beforehand. I didn't take a ton of notes, but yeah, I came all the way around because I thought the episode was definitely going to go the blah 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 holodeck fix whatever in it, and it ended up coming up with some nice twists and concepts and everything that I ended up liking it a lot.
Yeah, I definitely see this. The con parallels did occur to me as well, Stephen. It could have paled by comparison, but no, it was actually pretty solid because I think Daniel Davis plays a great villain, great Moriarty.
Yeah.
The episode centers on him a lot. I know I'd seen this episode before because I distinctly remember the ending with them driving away in the shuttle, but I did not remember the twist. Either twist, the twist and then the reprise of the twist.
Yes,
I guess you could say. Did not remember those things. I think I probably saw this episode like once way back in the 90s. So yeah, it was fun to get that surprise. I thought it was a good thinker. I don't think it was perfect. I think it had some logic plot holes. Yeah. But I appreciated that there were some serious twists and turns with a villain with stakes. Even though I do want to know why, once again, the ship even got close enough to be in danger.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
we can't back up. But why were you that close in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Because nothing could possibly go wrong. There's a routine maneuver.
Every time. Space Seed and Wrath of Khan were 15 years apart. And these two episodes were 4 years apart in the real world, as well as on the show. So I kind of like that, keeping that up too. I thought that was really cool. And it was surprised me, and I think that maybe that speaks to how much when we're in our Trek world, it's a little different than the regular world. But it surprised me that it had been 4 years since, or 4 seasons since that episode.
Well, yeah, it was a Pulaski episode the first time around.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, shame she did not return for this, but that's okay. So we start with Data as Sherlock doing a murder reveal with Geordi as Watson, which is fun because we haven't seen him as Sherlock and Watson in a while. And it's definitely one of those, like, a heavy logic. And then when Data is wrong about the guy being left-handed, the gentleman played by Clement von Frankenstein, Frankenstein,
Oh, yeah.
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Thank you.
He's best known for The American President, Take Me Home Tonight, Death Becomes Her, Lionheart. Looks like he's more of a movie guy. But when Data's logic failed him, my first thought was something's wrong with Data. My first thought wasn't holodeck's wrong, but that's dumb because it's always the holodeck wrong, right?
Yep.
But then they call Barclay for tech support, and I have to say, as much as I love Barclay episodes, I also really appreciated that he was in a non-Barclay episode because this was not centered around him.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see him as a supporting player.
Yeah.
Makes the world feel more whole.
Somebody actually said the phrase, "There's a problem with the holodeck." I'm like, really? No kidding.
Must be Tuesday.
Like, at some point, there has to be a cost-benefit analysis. Like, I think a holodeck's obviously a good thing, but and maybe they did do the analysis. They're like, yeah, the crew absolutely has to have this. Doesn't matter how often we puts the ship in barrel, we have to have this thing on here. But man, it seems like, I mean, what's the rate of peril? Like, if we don't have the ship in trouble, then we've got Barclay, doing questionable things in there. It's. Yeah.
I mean, it only happens like once a year, and considering how much use the holodeck gets.
That's like yet another parallel between this and the episode of DS9 that this is paired with. Well, but from our perspective, anyway.
We did not watch. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Yes, we watched Babel at the same time as we watched this.
Yeah. So there are a couple of the interesting themes that I noticed. So that's one of them. So.
Well, I will say I appreciated that even though it seemed a very minor glitch that the guy's was left-handed switch, what his dominant hand was, they immediately called Barclay to do some deep investigation for even a minor glitch. So clearly, Steven, they've learned the lesson that you're saying that things go wrong. And whenever they see something minor, they now bring in the big guns, their best diagnostician to figure it out.
That's a great point. I like that.
Yeah.
Nobody thought to put a protection on the Moriarty program, though, so that somebody like Barclay couldn't just accidentally turn it on.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed more like he was doing it to investigate, though. I mean, he phrased as though he did it accidentally, but I mean, it's more like he just didn't know what the significance of it was, I would say.
Right. It's just a random file anyone can just accidentally randomly turn on. You'd think that would have some type of protection lock on it, like you need a Picard security code or something.
That does make sense, but maybe I would like to think that he is high enough ranking as far as technical investigations that they wouldn't think to protect it from him necessarily.
I just think there should be some level of warning, like, hey, not necessarily that he couldn't turn it on, but like, hey, are you sure you want to turn this on? This has,
or maybe a backstory or something.
To it.
Yeah, like we
need a pop up.
With a little.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Would you like to watch this episode from season 2, or real quick just to catch up? Previously on The Next Generation, it gives you one of those little.
I mean, that's the part that we missed as he was hitting the buttons, is the pop-up came and he immediately dismissed it without reading it like everybody else when pop-ups come. The other plot that's going on, we're introduced to at this point, is there's 2 gas giants colliding, which will make a star. I looked it up, and I'm finding conflicting information on whether they could make a star from 2 gas giants colliding. I think it's a cool concept. I think they should study it up close. I think they should not quite get as close. No. But, send some sensor probes, study it that way.
I mean, if we've learned anything from the history of television and sci-fi shows, even, it's when something like that happens, somebody says it's going to blow, and you get as far away as possible. You don't run towards it. Yeah.
Picard's filled in on what's going on, and he's very empathetic to Moriarty. And, he actually has tried to solve the problem. He didn't just forget about it. He ran it up the ladder. Starfleet commanded a whole department, investigating it. I feel like that's the best you can do, but Moriarty is a villain, as much as he kept trying to insist he wasn't. I mean, you could tell from the beginning the way he was manipulating them. Even before you realized just how much he was manipulating them, he was acting like a villain the entire time. Just a very charming villain.
It's very much like Khan being like, hey, man, you left me here on this planet. And it's like, yeah, I should have killed you, but I didn't. So you're welcome. But, people.
Yeah, that was another theme that I noticed, that he's a great character because he is a villain who doesn't seem to be villainous, or he's a person who's doing villainous acts without necessarily having to come off like a menacing villain. It was all very civilized, and despite the peril they were always in, it was never felt like he was, that he always let the danger of the situation itself do the posturing for him. I guess.
I thought I was with him for a while, and then when he started doing his whole thing, like, well, would you deny me the woman that I've loved forever? And blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, buddy. All right. Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this universe. All right, then why are you here? Go back to your holodeck world.
I mean, when he first brought that up, I was like, yeah, come on, dude. But the more I think about it, the more I was like, oh no, he's using her as a reason for them to figure out the technology, because without her, then there's no reason for them to investigate the layers. So it's all part of his manipulation. I do think he loves her, but I also think he'd sell her out for a dime if he could. I think that was part of the manipulation.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of it that way. That's really good.
He was doing the whole frozen caveman lawyer bit. Like,
yes.
I'm just a guy. I'm just a program from that's based in the 19th century. Blah 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 blah.
That popped right into my head the first time you were saying, "Come on, man." I thought I almost made the reference. I didn't think you were going for it, but
I don't know these fancy things like holodecks and shuttles and computers.
And I guess maybe that explains, because for a time I was like, shouldn't he be freaking out at all this? And then I was like, no, I guess not, because he understands he's a computer program. So, and
he's tapped into the computer, so he knows a lot,
and he's a smart person. So,
but then he seems surprised that he's in space.
Yeah, that didn't.
I mean, clearly he's faking it for Picard, but at that point, even Picard should know. Like, yeah, he's already knows that. Like, I don't know, that felt a little bit.
I mean, he wouldn't need to know that type of information necessarily from all the other things that he'd learned. He just knows he's on some sort of vessel.
But he learned like how the computer worked and the systems of the vessel. So he would have to know that it's traveling through space and not water. I think that'd be pretty obvious from the systems and the design of the vessel.
At some point,
maybe
he's talking about, like, he's asking, like, well, how do I learn about this stuff? Picard's like, oh, we've got all kinds of stuff on the ship to help you learn. I'm like, they still have that whole open book policy. I'm telling you.
That's how Khan did it. They give Khan the open book.
It's another parallel. Yeah.
Going back a little bit, so the scene where he walks off the holodeck, first of all, they throw the book and it disappears in the thing, and I'm like, wait a second, costumes walk off the holodeck that they created in the holodeck. Right. Water, if you fall in the water and get wet, the water comes with you off the holodeck. How can you not take a book? Like, I get a personality is too sophisticated a program, but considering that part of the holodeck works with replicators, you'd think small objects are actually replicated and could be carried off.
Well, I think you just answered your own question. I'm sure that some are, but I think it would probably depend on the complexity of the object or what the function it would need to serve, because like clothing would need to actually follow your form in a certain way that maybe a projection wouldn't be able to, but a book could just be.
Well, unless you started reading it and then it had to get more complex.
When they throw the book, possible. Is that right before he walks out or right after he walks out? Okay, so
before.
So Moriarty must have programmed into the holodeck.
Yes.
That if somebody throws anything else through here, it'll disappear.
And yet in that other episode, way back in season 1, like the guy stumbled out and died in the hallway before he dissolved, rather than just disappearing at the end. Yeah. So it's not consistent. But
arbitrary lines.
I mean, I guess for the sake of the belief, you kind of have to suspend that season 1 versus now of how exactly the doorway works. But I do think they needed to be a little bit more clear and consistent on what could and could not leave the holodeck.
Yeah. I like he threw out the Descartes line when he got to the door of, I think, therefore I am, or whatever. And like, okay. And then later it's like, because at first I wrote, oh, that's right, Descartes trumps all science. And then later on it comes back around, I was like, okay, that's just a nice flourish from Moriarty.
Before I realized what he was doing, I was like, can't you stick a finger out first and see how it goes?
Yeah, exactly. But it was all for show. I mean, some of the things do make more sense in retrospect. Mm-hmm. And as I said, Jimmy, you pointed out a couple of things I don't think I'd thought about before. If I'd forgotten them, and just never really. I think the last time I watched this, I just really wasn't analyzing it in that way. But you caught certain, some very good points. Yeah, like toward the beginning, as it was going on, I realized, I'm pretty sure that I'd seen this episode before, though I couldn't place exactly when, and I couldn't quite remember the twist either. And I was kind of being fished in by some of those things. Like, well, I mean, the idea, because they show you right at the cold open when you get the stinger, him going like, I've done something misleading and evil to the camera. I'm back. You know, the Bugs Bunny thing, like pulling down the beard, like, hey, folks, it's really me. And then, okay, so he must have done something. And then you have the title of the episode, which is a big hint. And so and
eventually he says, say the title, Keith.
He does say it.
It's like, but yeah, that explanation popped in my head pretty soon. But then I started explaining it away with other things like, why would he do this? Why would he bother to do that if this were? And it's like, oh. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it was distraction because honestly, in retrospect, I think our first really big hit should have been when Dr. Crusher scanned him and said he was a real human.
Yeah.
She mentions unusual DNA, but she says he's human, which that seems really bizarre. But then immediately he's just like, well, I don't care why I'm like this. I just want to know what I can do now. Like he is distracting by saying, we don't need to investigate why this is coming up this way. And at that point, because he's providing this other thing to focus on instead, and you as a person are empathetic, you allow yourself to be distracted. Whereas if you really dug into that original first mystery, it would kind of fall apart pretty quickly.
Do you think that he deliberately programmed it so that he would seem human to this other play actor involved? Or, did he just simply not understand how the HoloLight technology itself worked? I mean, it seemed like he had some sort of inkling, but his insistence on how possible it should be seemed to indicate that he doesn't fully know. I mean, it's sort of like, well, I mean, it's essentially an artificially intelligent being who wouldn't necessarily have access to the whole of everything as far as, it's simulating, I guess, the mind of Moriarty as it would have existed at that time period and what he would be capable of learning in sequence. So, I mean, he wouldn't even know where to start to understand something like that, probably.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, he had limitations that weren't immediately obvious. That's when he first brings up the love. Picard says no. And that was such a strange conversation because Moriarty was constantly sucking up and getting angry, like back and forth in a very uneven way. And I guess that's your villain character, but...
The Countess wasn't in the last episode, right?
No.
Okay.
New character, Countess Bartholomew.
They certainly implied that we had seen her before in some way, though, didn't they?
I think they implied she was a character in Sherlock Holmes, not necessarily the main scene.
Okay.
She was created by the program, but not by him.
Correct.
Okay.
Wait, created by the program in what sense, though? I mean, because she existed in the book, or because he made it sound like they did something for him?
I think that she was created because the character in the book was that way, and then he enhanced her the way he was enhanced.
Okay.
Well, I understood that, but like the very beginning, he brings her up. And I think that he seemed to say a statement that made it sound as though they, the crew, had made some sort of Bride of Frankenstein for him or something, or wrote it into his backstory. So
the way I took it is, well, the crew created the holodeck program, so he's giving them more personal responsibility than they really would have had. Because I don't think they created the holodeck program. I think they ordered it from Amazon or whatever.
I didn't understand why she couldn't just walk out. But then in hindsight... Yeah,
Jimmy explained it. I hadn't thought about it either. But the whole point was to provide something for him to spy on and to either... Well,
and to convince the crew that this is possible, you need to do it again. Even though it hadn't been done the first time. Yes. He thought that they could do it and they just weren't trying hard enough. So he set up a situation to make them try harder.
Well... And that explains why, because I thought she should have freaked out about the 24th century too, since she.
But James filled her in.
Well, yeah.
She actually read the pop-up. She watched the previously on.
He changed her programming, which gets into another entirely different kind of thing of if he was able to change the whole program, did he change her programming to love him? Which is now we're into a different issue. But this thing gets deep.
Well, again, whatever the truth of the situation was, that his original statement did imply that she was already written to love him for some reason, whether it was a character that Doyle wrote or some flavor thing that they threw in or some other author did, who knows? But I mean, it did sound like she was just another
Nicholas Meyer.
We should mention she was played by Stephanie Beacham, best known for Dynasty, Love and Other Disasters, Sister Kane, Dracula 1972. She was in Beverly Hills 90210, Sequest 2032, a bunch of stuff. So she's been around a long time, bunch of credits. I thought she was also excellent in this. Like the guest stars were top notch.
Yeah, I mean, she was definitely alluring, and if you Google her, you'll find a recent article from the Daily Mirror. She's 74, still looks amazing. And she also had a date with Marlon Brando once. She did one of her credits is in a Brando film, and she said she wanted to go on a date with him because then if he fired her, she could still say she had a date with Marlon Brando. So she seems cool. I enjoyed her a lot. I thought she was exactly what the character needed.
So it wasn't to sue him.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's my only fashion note is her outfit as well. Like, I enjoyed the fashion in this episode. Yes. It was perfectly period appropriate.
The fashion at So folks, they really loved what she had going on as well, especially the hat. But, yeah.
So Moriarty only has one method, right? Because last time he took hostages, this time he took hostages. That's his whole... Go back to the same game plan.
Is that what happens in the books? I know I watched a little of the series.
Yeah, I watched the Benedict Cumberbatch series. I don't remember him really taking hostages, but I've only read like a couple of the Sherlock books. Yeah. So when Data was having trouble with the transporter, my comment was, well, O'Brien can make it work. It's too bad he went to Deep Space Nine.
Going back to the hostage thing, I think that Jimmy's the other part of your theory fits that as well, because that's something you might want to do for misdirection. You would want to he might want to make them underestimate him to that extent. They're like, this, I'm simple-minded, I'm just a simple storybook villain, and I only know how to do this one thing, this one trick, is to and I think part of why he seemed so calm about that as well. It's so they wouldn't look much deeper than what he was already doing.
Mm-hmm. This is another question about how the holodeck works exactly. I think we've talked about this before, that Picard and Data are a completely different part of the ship than Barclay, but they're all still in that same holodeck at one point. Yeah, I don't have good explanation for how that's possible, but we have just introduced, as of this month, our version of the holodecking universe journey. And I have in my notes, a big thing is I'm going to say they all have to be within the same room dimensions within each other. They can't go off, because that always bothered me.
Well, I mean, I could think of how to do it programmatically if I absolutely had to. I mean, it's similar to what you would have in a multiplayer game with like a split screen.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, you'd probably have some sort of membrane that would automatically come up, and you'd probably have to have treadmills of some sort going through the place.
They've mentioned that I think there's like treadmills within the holodeck.
Did they say that within the series already yet?
I don't know if it was novels or on screen, but I definitely have heard of treadmills being part of the holodeck technology.
On Ready Player One, the book, I liked that they actually talked about the technology in detail, in the sense that he actually had some sort of omnidirectional plane that he would be able to run on. It would incline or whatever. And
the Orville, I know we kind of consider that the Star Trek universe, even though obviously it isn't, but they got into a little bit of the holodeck, explaining how their holodeck works, which was kind of more of a, you feel like you're moving, but you're not moving kind of a thing. It's kind of like the
IMAX,
all the pixels, and it was kind of that kind of a thing.
Okay. I remember when that technology first came out, or when it seems to be different than essentially what we see in movie theaters, but those specially dedicated ones they used to have at like amusement parks. I think the first time I saw one was at Space Camp. Essentially they had one of those theaters, and the first time it felt so much like you're on a roller coaster when you're sitting in the seat. Something about the way they had the stadium seating set up, the bars and everything had. I think the screen had to be almost like floor to ceiling, and it was just something about the angle that it doesn't seem to work that way in like movie theaters, though, like normal commercial theaters at this point.
As far as how much the Orville counts, Mission Log, which is the official Roddenberry Network podcast, they have now covered Orville episode by episode alongside their Star Trek reviews.
It's hard to not feel like it's...
When the Roddenberry machinery is also treating it that way, I mean, I know that's not Paramount's official position, but that's about as close as you get. So we find out the holodeck twist that they're still on the holodeck because Geordi's left-handed all of a sudden, or right-handed. I can't remember. He's the wrong-handed.
Yeah.
I mean, Chekhov's hand rears up. Not that Chekhov. But it was kind of fun that they put that little glitch in. I like the callback. I think it's good writing. The cohesion. So Picard then threatens the Countess. That's your hero being slightly villainous, which I guess makes for good complex characters. But is he being villainous if she's not even real? Does he consider her real? Who knows?
I think it's all part of the gambit again. It was the if Picard had to justify it to himself, he had already figured out that the whole thing wasn't real to begin with. He's within this other thing that So I think he's it's all part of the misdirection. Like not even using sentences. He's turning the same sort of misdirection that Moriarty was using on them back on Moriarty. The sense of presenting a very basic seeming scheme to hide the rest of the intentions of what was going on, or rather the larger context.
So the part of the transporter that's relevant is the Heisenberg compensator. And you may know the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is a real thing formulated about 100 years ago by a German physicist. That means we cannot know both the position and speed of a particle with perfect accuracy. So it's something about uncertainty and misdirection. So I think that was kind of appropriate.
That's funny.
Though they did ask Mike Okuda, who was the technical advisor on Star Trek, how do the Heisenberg compensators work? And his response was, they work just fine, thank you. I appreciated that. I like Okuda. So at the end of the whole thing, Barclay's got the whole thing on a portable unit that he can keep around, but you can tell the way he's looking at it like he's paranoid, and he kind of tests this thing. And I'm like, for somebody who's as psychologically unstable as Barclay, this has got to give him a simulation theory complex the rest of his life. If he wonders if he's that, especially the fact that they tricked these other two into believing that they're still in the holodeck. Of course, he's going to think maybe I still the holodeck.
Well, and one of his, I think it was his first episode where at the end he's like, "All right, end the program, or whatever." And we talked about like, was that within another program? I mentioned that then. Yeah, and I completely agree, Jimmy. I think at the end when he's like, "Oh crap, am I still? Is this a program I set up? Is it?" Yeah, I think he's in. I think he's probably. And whatever your delusion that's going on, or whatever you get consumed with, or whatever, at some point you can start to lose yourself. Whether it's whether it's war, or whatever your mental malady that drives you to a place where you question reality, or your reality changes. Yeah, I think he's there. Sorry, Barclay. I think he's doing his job, but
I mean, I'm pretty sure we're going to reveal in Star Trek Picard season 3 that we've been in Barclay's holodeck program since season 2 of The Next Generation.
It's all been. My final note was that the series finale of Picard, whenever that is, that it should be that Picard was locked in this episode for Moriarty the whole time.
I mean, that's kind of, not exactly, but kind of what they did with the Enterprise series finale, that Star Trek Enterprise, that the whole series finale was a holodeck program.
Yeah, it's like the season of Dallas. It was all a dream.
Yeah. The whole Enterprise series wasn't a holodeck program, presumably, but the last episode was.
I don't need to watch it now. Then I guess
you'll forget.
Whole series is done.
So I liked all that in the Matrix kind of stuff of like kind of to that same point, because I think it makes sense that Barclay is like, am I in a program? Because they sent those two off into a program. If they don't know, does it matter if they don't think they're in one? Because scientists think there's a good chance we're in a program right now.
Some do. I wouldn't say scientists. I'd say some theorists.
I've seen some memes about it to that effect, which is funny. But
Elon Musk thinks we are.
The Will Wheaton one.
I would direct you guys. There is a long Ringer article about the Matrix and all this stuff, and there are some actual smart people that actually discuss this and think. I can't say that they think it's highly likely, but they're like, doesn't it make sense? And some would argue that's what deja vu is, but Freud wouldn't say that. But
my argument would be, doesn't matter. It's the reality we have.
Exactly, and
it matters if you figure out the rules to it.
I guess you're right. If you can figure out the rules and change the rules, it matters.
Yes.
That's why they got rid of phone booths. They shut them down. They can't get out.
I will say regarding mental health that Barclay does not get more mentally stable by the time he pops up in Voyager.
Okay.
If anything, he's far less mentally stable in the future than he is now. So I will say, the other thing I'll say is my alternate episode is How much fun would it have been to have a Moriarty and Countess Bartholomew spinoff of them traveling through the galaxy in their adventures?
It would be fun. I think it would end up having to go somewhere to the extent that they're working toward discovering the truth of what's going on, and it's sort of like a Conway.
Or maybe they did become, if we were going to do the spinoff, maybe you did get them out of the holodeck and have them actually in the world.
Yeah, my alternate episode is along those same lines, and I think I brought the show up before on here. And I wrote this down, and then the episode ended up flipping it anyway and almost kind of going there, which I wrote down, the Enterprise is a holodeck program, which turns out that was the thing in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this almost goes to your idea, which, if you guys remember the series Wild Wild West, it was set in theory in the 19th century, but they had all these futuristic James Bond kind of gadgets. So that's what I was looking at, was like, oh, okay, those two live in this world where the Enterprise is a holodeck program, because they live in the 19th century, but they've been able to develop a holodeck nonetheless, and they came up with the Enterprise, and that's kind of flipping it. But again, by the end of the episode, it's like, oh, you guys already beat me to this. Never mind.
Yeah.
So you really shouldn't have maybe start thinking about this sort of thing, because I'm starting to get distracted in the sense of I'm just going off in my head about some of the theories I've considered before, which is a principle I've considered, and I don't think I'm the first one, certainly, but that you've heard of like the collective unconscious. I think that somehow that could be, that could play into a lot of things as far as the way that physics actually work. It would explain how something could be a simulation that wouldn't necessarily be something that an external force has placed us in. It might work in the sense that we are consensually, which is to say, as a consensus rather than with, giving consent, coming up with the way that new scientific advancements work. When someone figures out how to work something into the rules, then it suddenly becomes reality. Like if you're exploring space, you would have to have it's sort of like that's the grid behind me. There's just some void out there that people have to figure out how to fill in before we can get to it or something, Oh, that would also explain why like magic might have been real at one point, until people figured out that it didn't quite make sense, and they had to come up with a different way to make things make sense, and had to start creating a new framework for physics. And so then everything had to be redone in that way to accomplish things more consistently.
The episode was written by Renee Echevarria, one of our regulars.
To segue out of this one.
And directed by Alexander Siddig, another one of our regular people. So these were core TNG people.
Shouldn't he go to jail? Like, okay, you're a real person, but you committed all these crimes. So if we're accepting this, shouldn't they be accepting that? And like, you're going to jail? And then I think Picard or somebody said that.
Are you talking about the crimes within the holodeck itself, or the character Moriarty?
Yes. Like
within the Sherlock Holmes world, or are you talking about when he tried to take him hostage?
Within the Sherlock Holmes world. So I thought as soon as they came out, and he's like, I'm a real person. I have thoughts, blah, blah. Yeah. And you committed crimes. If we're going to go that, let's go another step. You're going to the brig.
No, I think most of those actions happened essentially off screen or within a pretend framework. That's just the same as they would have been when they participate themselves as characters. So it's sort of like a live action movie, and his character was based on the blueprint of what Moriarty would think about, but not necessarily. He himself became a different person than that.
But at what point does he have free will? And then he is the one who's creating those things. I mean, I would argue that scientists would say none of us have free will, but and that's true also.
Yeah.
But sorry, Keith, you were saying.
No, it's just my assertion would be at that point that he would be culpable for taking them hostage. That's what Moriarty, the person, decided to do.
Yeah. And
Picard would have to decide whether or not to punish him for that, I suppose. And then he warned him, as I think you were just alluding to after that, when he's on the bridge, by the way, I don't quite trust you yet, so you need to know this. You used to be a villainous person, but in the real world, we'll catch you, and you will be punished for these things you do going forward. So
the left hand thing, Moriarty didn't create that, but things he was doing made that happen, right?
I think.
Or did we ever figure out?
It wasn't clear. I mean, that was just an indication of a glitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that it might have been. Yeah. My first thought was maybe he was doing that to send a message to them to bring attention to himself. But it did also seem like there might have been like an coincidental link to it, some sort of unintentional byproduct of the program being there. Barclay might have just come across it because he was just doing a deep scan of everything and it had nothing to do with anything. So
Right.
I don't know.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
1993 movie Ghost in the Machine had a similar thing of a villain. I think that's the plot of that movie is there's a villain in the machine, literally. Oh yeah, about a deceased serial killer with artificial computer intelligence. So yeah, it's a similar thing. Not a good movie. Karen Allen's in it, unfortunately, who I love. But anyway,
I can't remember what I thought about it exactly. I know I must have seen it at least once at the time. I think I sort of mixed it up with Ghost in the Shell, an anime, and there were, one of the anime tropes, especially when you're dealing with that kind of technology, was that you would have spirits trapped in these new futuristic machines.
Who is your annoyance?
this was a surprise. No one. The holodeck.
I'm going to put Picard for ordering the ship so close to the stars.
Yeah, that's fair too.
Maybe simulated Dr. Crusher.
Simulated Crusher was annoying.
Yes, because of the DNA thing.
Who are you having a drink with?
I love the Countess. Deep Suzanne Plachette type voice, English accent, and I'd seen some of the other things she'd done, and she seemed super cool. So I'm having the drink with the Countess, but kind of with Stephanie Beacham.
I'd probably say the same for similar reasons, though I suppose less detailed in that sense. But yeah,
I was going to have a drink with her and ask her what she sees in Moriarty.
Yeah,
just like Picard.
That's completely.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, are you really all for this stuff? I mean, come on.
Now that you're out here and you're free, check out the rest of the world.
Yeah, you could do better than this guy.
I mean, Riker'd be down for it.
I mean, yeah, obviously. Let's rank the episode. The quality of life. That was the one with the robots that are life forms. So another one where we're dealing with what is sentient life.
I think I like this one better than that. It could be a recency thing, of course, as one of the recurring themes, but I like the schemes within the schemes that we're going on with it. I think that kind of trumps it, and then also, yeah.
I think I do too, and I think I alluded to it earlier, kind of, which is, I rail against, ooh, you're keeping it a secret. Oh, what is it? And then the reveal comes and it sucks. And this one, they totally had me. I was already at point D, and they're like, no, come back here. We're not going that way. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. So yeah, nice. I'll go above. As well.
Great. Above that is True Q. That was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. It's just.
I think I like this a little more.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Well, above that is Realm of Fear.
It certainly seems like it's in the right area then.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think this one is going to be more memorable to me for several reasons. I would put it higher.
Okay.
My recency bias is saying higher.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm fine with higher. Above that, we're getting close to the top now, is Relics, the Scotty episode.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't put it above that one, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's stop there then. That puts it at number 4 for the season out of 12. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Next week, we're going back to Deep Space Nine and talking Babel. The crew and civilian population of Deep Space Nine began to speak gibberish when a plague, an aphasia virus engineered by the Bajorans as a weapon against the Cardassians, spoilers.
Are you kidding me?
Accidentally gets released into the station's atmosphere.
I'll be furious. Oh my God.
Know.
That's like, even virus was too much. I mean.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. We know IMDb synopsises suck.
Yeah.
Anyway, until then, live long.
Stay out of the holodeck.
I'm not staying out. You can't
be
make
helped.
me.
And prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?